Hello and welcome back to Fandomology, where fandoms collide. I am, of course, Paul, and tonight we are, I guess you could say, retreading on old ground that we didn't quite finish before. So, you've seen the title. We're going to be going over the Orville, even though tonight is Tuesday Night Trek. And the reason I wanted to do this is because, see, I had no intention of really getting back into the Orville, at least not until after I had gotten through all of classic Trek, finishing DS9, Voyager, the movies, and Enterprise. But then out of all places, I started seeing like these short little clips of the Orville, specifically Orville season 3, in, of all places, the TikTok For You page. And that made me want to go ahead and get back into it. So we're doing the Orville season 1 tonight. And by the way, I did send out an invite to my friend Spock of Spock's Friday Nights. And he's hopefully going to join me. And we're going to talk about the Orville season 1 as a whole. And then next week, we'll be back doing normal Deep Space Nine. We'll be wrapping up season 2. And then the week after that, we'll do Orville season 2, and so on and so forth until we've gone entirely through the Orville, and then it'll be back completely to Deep Space Nine. But at the same time, I am still waiting on Spock, so I figured let's put this time to good use and do some music. So, okay. So I have to confess, this is kind of also tying into the Kiss streams that I've been doing with Phil, talking about the band Kiss. I have been inspired to learn some of their songs, and so I'm going to do some of them now for you. Let's start with this one. If never I met you, never have seen you cry. Not for the first hello, you never have to say goodbye. If never I held you, my feelings would never show. It's time I start walking, but there's so much you never know. I keep telling you, hard luck woman, you'll be a hard luck woman. Rex, the sailor's only daughter, a child of the water, too proud to be a queen. Rex, I really love you, I can't forget about you. You'll be a hard luck woman, baby, till you find your man. Before I go, let me kiss you, wipe the tears from your eyes. I don't wanna hurt you, girl, you know I could never lie. I keep telling you, hard luck woman, you'll be a hard luck woman. You'll be a hard luck woman, baby, till you find your man. Rex, the sailor's only daughter, a child of the water, too proud to be a queen. Rex, I really love you, I can't forget about you. You'll be a hard luck woman, baby, till you find your man. You'll be a hard luck woman, baby, till you find your man. So that was Hard Luck Woman off the Rock and Roll Over album. And I want to say hello to my friend Nerdporial, who says you're doing the Orville now. And he also asks, did you notice any parallels with TOS? And he also says, I'd love to join, but I'm out now. I got it, man. That's perfectly fine. It's funny you say that. I'll answer the second question first. I really didn't notice. I did notice some parallels with TOS, but I noticed a heck of a lot more with TNG. But that's probably because I've seen TNG more recently. And I'll talk about those a little bit later when we get into, the certain details. But yes, I'll go ahead and reiterate. I decided to go ahead and get back with the Orville after, of all places, seeing short clips of the Orville on TikTok. And so what I'm doing is, at least for the foreseeable future, I'm alternating weeks on Tuesday Night Trek between talking about Deep Space Nine and talking about the Orville. So this week is the Orville. Next week will be finishing up Deep Space Nine Season 2, then back to the Orville, then back to DS9, then back to the Orville for the so far final season. So that's how it's going. And he says, Priority 1, distress call in the first episode. Episode 2, oh, okay, you're right. I completely blanked out on those. You're right. So we'll get into those here in a little bit. But right now, I'm doing some music because I invited Spock to come and join me, and Spock isn't here yet. So I decided to do some music tonight also. And I think also, if you guys, and I'm speaking to all 466 subscribers of you, if you guys are interested, I might bring back sort of the music pre-streams, at least on the Sunday stream. All right, we're good. He also says episode 3 is very TNG. Yes, it is. In fact, I think that's probably the single most important, arguably the single most important episode of the whole series, at least for one specific character. And we'll get to that later. Episode 4, A World on a Starship. Yep, that is right. So I'll do 2 more songs. And then if Spock isn't here by then, I'll just go ahead and start talking. So let's do this one. Beth, I hear you calling, but I can't come home right now. Me and the boys are playing, and we just can't find the sound. Just a few more hours, and I'll be right home to you. I think I hear them calling. Oh, Beth, what can I do? Oh, Beth, what can I do? Say you feel so empty that our house just ain't a home. I'm always somewhere else. You're always there alone. Just a few more hours, and I'll be right home to you. think I hear them calling. Oh, Beth, what can I do? Beth, what can I do? Beth, I know you're lonely, and I hope you'll be alright. 'Cause me and the boys will be playing all night. All right. Let me see. All right, I have not heard anything from Spock yet. Excuse me. All right, let's see. I think we're going to go ahead and stop the music for now, and I'm just going to go ahead and get started with talking about the Orville. And again, this is only up my desk. This is only season 1 that I'm talking about tonight. So for the record, I'm going off of how Hulu has this listed right now. So we're starting with we're basically going from the episode Old Wounds to Mad Idolatry. So that's about 12 episodes. I'm not going to go through each one individually, and I'm going to turn the camera off too while I'm at it. I'm not going to go through each one individually. Instead, I'm going to basically do this like how I did way back when I was covering Cobra Kai, and I'm just going to talk about the episode as a whole. Granted, I will, of course, harp on certain episodes that I think are important. But overall, I'm not going to go into the nitty-gritty of these episodes. We're just going to talk about the season as a whole, and of course, in my opinion, the best part about this show, the characters. So, before we even get into this, it's important to know that this is basically the brainchild of Seth MacFarlane, who, of course, got his name to fame from Family Guy. And he's done other things too, like Ted, A Million Ways to Die in the West, and so on and so forth. But Seth MacFarlane, outside of all of that, was a big Star Trek fan. And I believe he did have a cameo. Those of you guys that are more knowledgeable about Trek than I am, I believe he did have a cameo in the show Enterprise. So someone fact check me on that, please. But he never was able to make an actual Star Trek show of his own. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, and again, someone please fact check me on this, but I believe Nerdporial or Spock or Pacific, someone that was at one point part of Tuesday Night Trek with me, did mention that when it was being decided who it was that was going to basically take the helm of Star Trek itself, the running was between him and Alex Kurtzman. And of course, we all see what happens there. So Seth MacFarlane, I'm sure, decided, okay, if I can't make actual Star Trek, I will make my own Star Trek, and I'll just, change up the universe, change up the aliens, and change up all the terminology. But the spirit of Star Trek will be there. So that, I believe, he resoundingly accomplished with, at the very least, from what I've seen, this first season of the Orville. And not only does Seth MacFarlane, not only did he create it, but he stars in it as the main captain, Captain Ed Mercer. And Captain Ed Mercer is... It feels unfair to compare him to the likes of Kirk, Picard, and Sisko, because they were written, those three characters were written with the express intention of being serious characters, even if sometimes, yes, through acting or dialogue, yes, they've had their lighthearted moments, intentional or otherwise, but they were mostly intended to be, for the most part, serious characters, especially Picard and Sisko. Whereas Seth MacFarlane, being a comedic writer first and foremost, the show is going to be is definitely going to be more comedic than at least classic Star Trek shows. But at the same time, I could very much see that if this was an actual Star Trek show and not just simply Spock just messaged me. He'll be along shortly. He's still going to try and join, but he's got other things to take care of right now. But anyways, what I'm trying to say is, put Captain Mercer, especially when he's being serious and not, joking around, put Captain Mercer on the bridge of any actual Star Trek show, and he would just fit right in. And honestly, same for all the rest of the characters, Kelly, Alara, Bortus, Gordon, John, and Isaac. By the way, hello to ActionCom, and it's good to see you, man. I have not heard from you in a while. In fact, I'm actually going to send you the link if you're interested to come and join me. We are talking about the Orville Season 1. So I just sent you the link, ActionCom, in Discord if you're able to join. So let's look at where Captain Ed Mercer is at the beginning of this. So instead of Starfleet in this universe, we have the Union. And instead of the United Federation of Planets is what I mean. It's the Union. And they don't call themselves Starfleet. It's just the Union Fleet. And we have Captain Ed Mercer, who is at the time just a commander. I don't remember what it said where he was when the show actually first started. I'm looking this up now, so forgive me here. Okay, so it said that he worked on Epsilon Eridani at the time that the show started. And at the time, he was also married to Kelly Grayson. And I want to bring in ActionCom. What's up, man?
How do you do?
I'm good. I haven't heard from you in a while.
Blame the beer bug.
Hey, that is perfectly fine. I had that thing twice, and I understand. But we're talking about the Orville Season 1 tonight, and I'm not exactly highlighting each individual episode. I'm just talking about it as a whole. So, as a whole, what would you say about Season 1 of the Orville?
I would say on the whole, it is good. But like all first seasons, it hasn't exactly got its voice down yet. It knows what it wants to portray, and it's also experimenting with things so it can stand out. But it's the fact that some of the stuff doesn't work doesn't bother me because the good stuff definitely outweigh the bad.
Exactly. Like, I'm going to go ahead and say, at least from my point of view, there is not a single bad episode in this lineup. There are some, obviously, that are stronger episodes than others, but every single episode is at least good, if not really good. And I want to highlight what Nova says here. He says each actor's role spoofed different Star Trek individuals from different shows. You're right, and we'll get into those
Exactly.
as we talk about them. So when you were coming in, I was sort of talking about Captain Mercer himself and sort of where he was when the show started. So the very first thing we see in the first episode is Ed is walking into his apartment and he catches his at the time wife, Kelly Grayson, cheating on him with a Retepsian, who is this it's basically he's this blue-skinned alien guy who when he will say reaches the summit, spouts blue liquid out his forehead. There's no way to say that without getting gross, but that basically, seeing his wife cheating on him like that sets Ed on this slump that lasts an entire year until he finally is given his own command of, quote, a mid-sized cruiser named the USS Orville.
Exactly.
So just that beginning, what'd you think?
Well, the first thing that kind of struck me is Earth of the future. I mean, the very first shot is a shuttle going through the city, and you see that everything's clean. There are beautiful buildings, and there's actually trees still there. So we're definitely moving away from the what's the dystopian future thing that is very popular in most science fiction.
Yes.
So I already know that they're on the right track.
It's also worth noting that, unlike in actual Star Trek, this time the Planetary Union and, of course, the Union fleet is based out of New York City this time instead of San Francisco.
Exactly, Boston.
Yes. So that was definitely, I think, a good. I mean, obviously they couldn't get away with using San Francisco. They had to make it original. So I think
it's because
New York would have
Seth,
made perfect sense.
I think Seth is from that area, so I'm sure all filmmakers they do filmmaking, reference their home once in a while.
Yeah, I mean, look at Stephen King. A good majority of his books are set in Maine. From Maine.
Exactly.
So, again, fast forward to a year later, and he is given command of the Orville, and Admiral Halsey, his name was, basically tells him, "This is you've been destined for a command because of how well you did at Union Point. But, you've really flushed your reputation down the toilet with this last year. So basically, you really need to make this command work."
It's interesting they don't show that, and perhaps maybe it's best that they didn't.
Yeah. I mean, maybe they could have done like a montage of it, like in flashbacks or something, but I tend to agree that, yeah, they want to keep mentioning the breakup, the cheating, but you don't want to dwell on the past. You want to keep moving forward.
It also might be that Seth might not be able to pull that off.
You're right.
But I won't go into it now.
Mm-hmm. So, who does he turn to? Basically, he says that the crew is fully staffed, but they are two key positions short. That being a helmsman and a first officer. So Admiral Halsey was basically said, okay, you find a helmsman, I'll find you a first officer. And Ed immediately turns to his best friend, Gordon Malloy, who is probably one of the funniest, at least human characters on this show.
By far. Definitely a free spirit.
Yeah. And he is indeed one of the best helmsmen in the Union, but he is a party animal. It's the best way I can put it.
Definitely. Loves video games, loves pranks.
Loves drinking a lot. So they both arrive to the Orville, and we get that first shot. It honestly reminded me a lot. Nerdporial asked me if I noticed any parallels with TOS. I noticed a big parallel. I'm going to technically count this as a TOS parallel with Star Trek the Motion Picture, and that shot where Kirk and Scotty finally see the completed Constitution class refit that is the new Enterprise.
Absolutely. I couldn't help thinking that myself.
Yeah. And the Orville itself is just an absolutely beautiful ship.
What were your first thoughts on it?
Well, I think it's just a beautiful ship. I really don't know what else to say. You know, I like the three, for lack of a better term, the 3-ring design on the back, the 3 engines.
Yes.
It's very sleek. We see it's very maneuverable. I just think it's a great ship.
It's interesting that they're doing what they can to kind of stay out of Star Trek's way and do their own thing. Like, you don't have 2 nacelles in the back, you have 3, and they're in vertical orientation. And instead of a saucer section and an engineering section, they just incorporate it all into one oval in the front.
Yes. Of course, they still have the detail of the little bridge capsule being on top behind the nose.
Mm-hmm. They also, I don't know how far you want to go forward, but when they were docking the shuttle into the shuttle bay, you saw the numbers 01 and 02.
Yeah.
Did that remind you of any other Star Trek movies?
I believe that was a reference to the shuttle Galileo.
It may have been. But actually, I'm talking about the doors, the ones that say 01 and 02.
Oh, Motion Picture and Wrath of Khan?
Wrath of Khan, particularly the Reliant, which had those shuttle doors on the back of its ship, which were very prominent.
Okay. But anyways...
You really had to be hardcore.
Yeah. That one, I'll admit, flew over my head. That was a shot in the dark that I was guessing there. But Captain Mercer arrives onto the Orville, gives his first welcome address to the crew, introducing himself, and then introduces himself further to all of the bridge officers. And this is where we pretty much meet the rest of the cast. And we'll just run through them real quick, starting with Alara. Now, Alara is a Zelayan. And it's interesting that they kind of somewhat make her look like Spock with the pointy ears, but they add ridges, or sorry, they add folds in the pointy ears and like ridges on her forehead. And it's also interesting that just in this first episode, she has no eyebrows, and that's something that they later correct in all the other episodes going forward. But what's important about her character is that she is probably age-wise the youngest of the bridge officers, but the reason she's in the position that she's in is because it's incredibly rare for any Zelayan to quote-unquote join the military. And the reason they are so valued is because outside of their own planets, where the gravitational pull is much, much higher, on Earth's gravity and the equivalent, they have incredible super strength. So that's
Exactly.
why she's in this position that she's in.
A very interesting attribute to a character that uh, looks very small and very young. She looks like she's like right out of high school almost, but hey,
She does.
it's
So she we don't we don't learn much more than that about her in the first episode, but we do learn more about her going forward. Then we
yes.
meet, and I'm kind of going out of order here. We meet John Lamar, who is, at least for now, the navigator, and he is the perfect partner, we'll say, in a comedic way, to Gordon. The way that the two just kind of bounce jokes off of each other, and the comedic timing, it's perfect.
And we'll get to know Lamar as not as much a free spirit as um, I'm blanking on it,
Gordon.
Gordon, but he lives a kind of lifestyle that uh, complements Gordon's
He
attitude towards
does.
life. Uh,
Yes.
I don't know if you want to discuss it now, but uh, it's supposed to be the amorous version of Geordie LaForge, who wasn't really that good with the ladies in Star Trek: The Next Generation, but here Lamar goes the other way. He's very good.
Yeah, that's probably the best way to put that. And then my favorite character on the bridge that we next meet is Lieutenant Commander Bortus, the second in command. And he is of the Mocklin species. And it's very interesting how he he looks like a knockoff of a Klingon, yet he acts like a Vulcan. Very emotionless, very monotone. Well, except when he has to shout, of course. But he is just the way that he carries himself, and yet can still, where he's very stern, but also very unintentionally funny. He's my favorite character on this show, and he becomes very important in episode 3.
Yeah, we'll discover that there's many layers to him and to his people.
Mm-hmm.
The When I first saw him, I couldn't help but think of Worf. And at first, it didn't strike me that he was stoic, or how should I put it, that he was Vulcan like. I just thought he was just reserved, studying, kind of like the minute you cross him, he'll jump you kind of
Yes.
character. But he's definitely no nonsense. That when by the end of the scene, I kind of got that from him that you
We
can't.
also we also learned something very interesting about Mocklin biology in that first episode, and that is that Mocklins only go number one once a year.
Oh yeah,
And
and
then after Bortus, the next person that we meet is Dr. Claire Finn. And if I'm not mistaken, the actress that played her was someone that was on Deep Space Nine. Am I correct?
yes, she was in the later seasons.
Okay, and what role did she play there?
She was she was set up to be uh, Cisco's uh, new romantic interest. I forget her name.
Okay, I gotcha. But anyways, here she's playing Dr. Claire Finn, and she comes off, at least to me, as a mix of Dr. McCoy and Dr. Crusher as far as demeanor and personality goes. Would you say that's about accurate?
I liked her immediately. Yeah,
Oh yeah, she's
she gives
great.
off that vibe that she's a professional, but at the same time she's very friendly,
Yes,
and um, she's probably the least eccentric of this cast of characters that we've been introduced to. But she will make a big contribution to the show throughout the seasons.
yes. And then finally, we meet Isaac, who is an artificial being from the planet Kalon. And basically, this is very obviously a spoof of Data. And you know that line in Encounter at Farpoint where Riker and Data are talking in the holodeck, and I forget what Riker says to cause Data to say this, but he says, I am superior in every way, but I would give it all up to be human. With Isaac, it's the opposite, where yes, he is superior in every way, and because of that, he and his people look down upon all other races because they're better.
Exactly. And I gotta admit, I was drawn to that character the most because I could imagine some of the possibilities with that character.
Yes.
Because
So,
unlike Data, where Data was drawn to humanity, here we got a character who's a little resistant and will require humanity to meet him halfway a little bit. And I thought that was interesting.
yes. So, so yeah, overall, it's a great cast that yes is it's weird that it's a spoof of the tropes of Star Trek characters, but it's also very good examples of them. Kind of this show in a nutshell, where yes, it is a spoof of Star Trek, but it's also a great example of what Trek is about, going out and exploring space for the betterment of pretty much all life.
Exactly. Remember how they were saying that the new Star Trek has to be 25% different in order to avoid copyright?
Yeah,
These characters are 75% different. You only see a little bit of Star Trek from Deep Space Nine or the Next Generation. You just see enough, but there's a lot of changes there to help it go in a new direction. And if you're a fan of Star Trek The Next Generation, you're fine with that. They don't have to be carbon copies, they don't have to be 75% the same. 25% is very good
hmm.
starting out.
So finally, though, Captain Mercer gets a first officer, and wouldn't you know it, it's Kelly, the lady that he was married to that cheated on him, and he is just completely not okay with this. So he tries to plead his case to Admiral Halsey, but Admiral Halsey says, no, this is the only, she's the only person that was available to fill the slot, and it's not going to look good for you with your reputation to be complaining about about who you got assigned as first officer this early in your command. So Kelly, I really, if Bortus is my favorite character, I would say Kelly is probably my second or third favorite, excuse me, favorite character. By the way, hello to Fly Productions. Thanks for joining us.
Welcome,
I don't
welcome.
believe I've, I don't believe I've seen you around before, so if this is indeed your first time, as always, make sure that you are subscribed because we don't just talk about the Orville around here. We talk about anything and everything entertainment wise. I do plenty of gaming streams. Sometimes I'll do a stream where I play my guitar and sing. So make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss out on any of that. But anyways, Kelly comes on to I almost said the Enterprise, the Orville, and she is regretful for her actions, but at the same time, oh, hold on a second. All right. I'm sorry, man. My memory is terrible. So
Mine too.
I'm sorry. I legit thought you were a new person. But anyways, as far as the dynamic between Ed and Kelly, two now divorced people that now have to work together as captain and first officer, what do you think about that dynamic?
Well, I did wonder about it at first because when they have their first meeting and they start to argue, which led to that great scene of they think they're alone, but the crew can hear them arguing in the bridge.
Yes.
But, I didn't know. I wondered how this was going to work, but what's great is what a lesser show would have done would have let that hang in the air. This show does what I would expect a show of this type to do. Basically, that these people here may have their own issues, but they're also trained professionals, and that when rubber meets the road, they will act like that when it comes. So the issue will become: will Mercer listen to her at a critical moment, or will he let personal feeling into it? As long as there's no personal stake in it, I think they'll work just fine. But they're going to have to work through their issues.
Exactly.
So that's the dynamic I'm seeing there.
And even just in this first season, we see the highs and lows of them reconciling. Then the wounds open up again. They get over it. They try dating again. They realize it's not going to work. They go through the whole cycle within this season. And so basically, this whole season is just overall learning more about these characters, seeing how they work together.
We got one more character.
Yaphit? Okay, yes, we gotta mention Yaphit. Played, of course, by the late Norm Macdonald, rest in peace.
Late, great Norm Macdonald.
Yes, the late, great Norm Macdonald. And he is a gelatinous, character, and he is, I guess you could say, the assistant chief engineer who has an obsession, who has a crush, a huge crush on Dr. Finn.
I have to admit, though, at the early season, though, I didn't honestly think they were going to commit to that character. I just thought he was a one-off joke. When he was running down the hallway saying, "Oh, no, 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 no," and he accidentally runs over Yaphit, and he says, "Oh, sorry, man." He says, "Okay, all right."
But no, seeing more of Yaphit as the season went, it was just perfect. And Fly Production says, "I'm not oftenly on streams because every time there is a stream, it's like 3 a.m. in Poland." I understand, man. That's how time zones can be a pain. So, one thing that Nerdporial pointed out in the first episode as a callback to TOS is how the first episode is about them answering a, quote, priority 1 distress call to this one science place about a certain type of seed, instead of the quadotriticale grain. And it's here that not only are we introduced to this machine that can isolate a certain object in time and have it accelerated, but we're also introduced to, you could say, the main antagonist faction of the show, the Krill.
Exactly.
So, what did you think of these guys when you first saw them?
Actually, I didn't really think much of them at the time because they didn't really they weren't really given much of a voice. All I knew is they were the bad guys of the week as far as I was concerned. Um, so I know that these are the people they were going to keep this technology out of the hands from. And
Right.
that's a good place to start, particularly since you're going to be delving deep into their society. And I I just basically when I first saw them, I just took them as a plot device, not really, they were the bad guys, they were going to make trouble, and our characters were going to overcome them somehow, some way.
Right. But of course, as the season goes on and we get to learn more about them,
Mm-hmm.
at least to me, they come across like if you took the cunning, deception, just overall sliminess of the Romulans and mixed it with the faith-based way of living of the Bajorans and put that inside a reptilian body.
Exactly.
So basically, it ends up with Kelly and Ed decide, okay, look, we want to make this work. We can at least agree to work together. And they do indeed throughout the rest of the season. And we see, of course,
Exactly.
other characters get gets episodes that are spotlighted on them. Like, for example, episode 2, we see Alara being forced into having to take command of the whole ship because Ed and Kelly get kidnapped for this zoo that was being made by this really, really advanced civilization. Gee, I wonder what that sounds like.
But what's interesting is it what it does is it establishes a hierarchy of species in this universe, of which
Mhm.
man is not part of the top.
Right. And remind me, what was that species that held the zoo? They were the red
Uh,
guys.
yeah. Um, can't think of it offhand.
Someone watching in the chat that knows, please help us out. But anyways, we see how, and basically the reason it has to be specifically Alara instead of Bortus is because Bortus has to sit on an egg that he just laid so that he and his mate Clyden could have a child. And so with Alara in command, she is like woefully unprepared for this, mentally at least.
Calivian.
And
Sorry.
what is it?
Calivian.
Calivians.
Yeah.
Okay. But anyways, she you see her go through all the different stages of nervousness to, oh crap, I screwed things up. And she even at one point decides that it's important to follow the orders of the Admiralty over rescuing Ed and Kelly. And real quick, hello to Spock's Friday Night, who says, I unfortunately cannot join the voice call, but I will be here in chat. I'm pretty tired after cleaning. Thanks again for the invite, Paul. I look forward to the next discussion. That's all right, man. We will be discussing, I'll go ahead and let you know now, we will be discussing the Orville Season 2 in 2 weeks from today. So next week, again, we'll be finishing up Deep Space Nine Season 2. The week after that will be Season 2 of the Orville. So hopefully you're able to join us then. But anyways, And that was like a great character moment for Alara when she at first tries to just go with the orders of the Admiralty instead of doing the right thing. And Gordon tries to call her out on that, but she ends up abusing her power and kicks him off the bridge, only to later have Gordon spell it out for her, saying, if let's see, Spock says, I will be there. Today the chores were left to me last minute. I get it, man. It happens all the time. But Gordon says, if the captain were the one in charge and you were the one captured, he would break command. He would disobey orders to rescue you because it's the right thing to do. And of course, she then goes and rescues Ed and Kelly. And at the end of that episode, kind of tying into the third one, Bortus and Clyden's egg hatches. And what do you know? It's a girl, which is something that is unheard of for a single gender species. And that goes into episode 3, which I would argue is probably the single most important episode of this entire season. Would you say?
Yeah, About a Girl. This one, this one's pure Orville. There,
Mm-hmm.
you might be able to find something in Star Trek on this, but you know what? This one went into territory that they refused to, and
Exactly.
I respect that they did, and they were more than fair.
Yeah. Because the whole point of this episode About a Girl is the Moclans, again, are a single gender species, and Clyden and Bortus have just had a girl. And so what do? Well, per Moclan tradition, any Moclan that is born female, pretty much immediately after birth, is given gender reassignment surgery. And at first, Bortus goes to Dr. Finn to do this, but Dr. Finn refuses because she thinks that doing gender reassignment surgery on an infant will be too traumatic for the baby. And real quick, Spock says About a Girl is a fantastic episode. Really felt like it belonged in Star Trek TNG or something. And and it's funny you say that, because that disagreement about giving, well, who we would later come to know as Topa, giving Topa that gender reassignment would basically spiral into this huge political affair between the Union and Moklis that ultimately is decided in a courtroom on Moklis, where Bortus and Clyden ultimately disagree as to what to do with their child. Clyden wants to follow Moclan tradition. Bortus, after a pretty funny scene of him watching Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer with Gordon and John, he decides, you know what? Let's leave our daughter as our daughter. And
Because
so,
that's the only conclusion you can come to after watching Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and a few beers.
exactly. And I just like the way he said it, where when he first talks to Clyde about this, where he's like, "We do not know what sort of future we are stealing from our daughter. Maybe one day she could lead Santa's reindeer to save Christmas." And Clyde's just like, "What?" But
Oh
at the same
boy.
time, but at the same time, the serious parts of this episode is also amazing, especially when it comes to the end. Spock's like, "You must hear the tale of Rudolph."
But what's interesting here is they make it pretty clear where the Moclans stand on the issue. And I'm sorry to say it, but Star Trek Discovery would not have handled it with the kind of care that this story deserved. I
No.
can't this is the perfect episode to showcase the differences between the two, where nowadays lessons are sort of shoved at the audience, whereas here it's seen as more of a debate.
Yeah.
What are the Machlin's values? What are the Union's fleet values or Earth values?
Hmm.
Uh, and they decide to hash it out in a courtroom.
Like Measure of a
And
Man.
yes, but actually, well, Measure of a Man was more personal. I mean, it was basically to decide whether or not Data was a machine, a toaster, or an actual entity that has been born from his parts and now is on his way, now is leading a normal life and is sentient. Here
Exactly.
they're here they're not talking about one person. They're talking about actually changing, going against society norms. I mean, if you're born a female, you got to do this. It's the way we live, it's the way we decided long ago. These are our values.
Hmm.
And the unions coming in and say, "Hey, we got different values, but we're willing to go through your own court system to come to a different conclusion. We'll bring our best as evidence to support that conclusion."
Spock says Discovery is less drama, more action. So you're right on the nail.
More the
So,
phaser than the law book.
mhm. So Bortus asks Kelly to basically be his legal representative in the Mocklin courts. And we also, by the way, just kind of changing the topic a little bit, we learned something else interesting that I know for a fact will have great implications into like season 3 is Mocklitz's main industry is weapons development.
Yes.
Like to the point that they basically have industrialized their entire planets, and they will test explosives literally anywhere and everywhere
So
in the
it's Thailand.
planets. Pretty much.
But
So
the idea that uh, a society would not strike a balance between its industry and its planet, and seeing the effects of that, that was an interesting flyover the planet.
it was.
It was like so
And
polluted, so I don't know if you ever saw the movie Blues Brothers, where they're doing a pan overshot of Chicago's industrial center in the morning.
mhm.
I was reminded of that with all the smoke and the fire and the.
Yeah, sadly I haven't seen that movie.
Hmm, well,
I think it's on my list, but I can't remember. But anyways, the court is very obviously biased against Bortus and Kelly, and ultimately chooses to side with Clyden. And
I
but
I would
something.
disagree. I would say it was bias. I'll give you that. It was bias, but the case they brought, I was unimpressed with. Their
Yeah,
case basically came down to the fact that certain women can have certain skill sets, change your values because of that.
right.
And
I'll give him this. The first example that they used with Alora showing greater strength, the, for lack of a better term, prosecution was right to say that that was an unfair demonstration because Zillayans are stronger than even Mocklins.
mhm.
So,
and there, right there, demonstrates the difference between Discovery and the Orville. Sometimes our characters make some weak arguments that you gotta that can be debated, and that even fans like us can debate whether or not that was a good
exactly.
demonstration.
Yes. But what ultimately becomes their strongest argument is, on a whim, Ed asks Isaac to try and find something on the computer, and Isaac finds it and sends him the coordinates. And so he, John, and Laura go up into the mountains, and lo and behold, they find an elderly Moclan female named Havina, who was basically writing in under a pseudonym, writing all of Moklus's greatest literary works under the name Gondas Eldon. And the fact that she basically revealed herself to be that shook the entire courtroom of Mocklans to their core. And I like how the prosecution at first didn't even want her to speak, because the fact that she was a female was a perversion to the Moclan, how they perceive the natural order.
Their values.
But ultimately she is allowed to speak, and she articulates herself perfectly, that she did have to live in seclusion, but she's happy she lives as a female. However, in spite of all of this, ultimately the courtroom decides that Topa does undergo the surgery to become male. And I already know that this gets reversed, by the way, in season 3. Thanks, TikTok, for spoiling that for me. But it'll be definitely interesting to see how Topa's journey basically starts here to where it ends in season 3.
Imagine how it was when you first saw it and they actually went through with it.
Yeah.
I still remember that. It's very much like that episode, Best of Both Worlds, when you saw Picard as that Borg. You really had to be there the first time when nobody knew anything, and how hard that hit.
Spock says season 3 was personally my favorite. It's funny you say that, Spock, because when I said earlier that the TikTok For You page was what got me into the Orville, it was specifically season 3 clips. And I won't say what I've seen until we get there, but that's pretty much what got me back into wanting to see this show and why we're talking about it now. So anyways, the next episode that I really want to dive into, because episodes 4 and 5 are all right. Nerdporio mentions episode 4 in the chats, A World on a Spaceship. I think that's a callback to For the World is Hollow and I Have Touched the Sky.
Mm-hmm. And Liam Neeson.
Yes, Liam Neeson does good.
The next two have some really big powerhouse cameos. So, but I understand if you want to.
Yeah, episode 5. There's nothing wrong with episodes 4 and 5, but I'm kind of glossing over them because I'm only hitting on what I think is like important for the show as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
And with episode 5, we get a guest star from Charlize Theron, who does a good job. But episode 6 is the one I really want to focus on next, because this is where we get to learn more about the Krill. So, during a good portion of the episode, we have Ed and Gordon infiltrating a Krill warship disguised as Krill themselves, and we learn why it is that they do what they do, why they attack other planets like they do, is because they are an incredibly theocratic people.
Exactly.
They believe in their god Avis, and they believe it is their holy right. By the way, hello to Shanika Pitts. Thanks for joining. They believe it's their holy right to claim everything in the universe for themselves, as ordained by Avis. And they believe that anyone that isn't Krill doesn't have a soul, which directly contrasts with, the far more secular agnostic Union. So
exactly. Oddly enough, Krill, the episode Krill, humanizes the Krill.
It does, but at the same time, they're still threatening.
Yes. We get to know a little about them, what they eat, how they live, how they treat their fellow compatriots.
Mm-hmm.
And I really did wonder where they were going to go with this. Like I said, when I first saw the Krill, I thought they were just a plot device. Bad guy over there. We got to keep technology and other thing away from them. They might kill us. That sort of thing. The thing that impressed me about the Krill was being that they are a religious race. I was kind of wondering how what that religion would have. Like, do they have similar morality than an Earth religion? Like, do they believe that thieves should be punished, or murderers, or uh, you know, what does their book,
The
the
Ancana, I believe it's
the
called.
Ancana, yeah, the sacred religious text? What does it say in there? I actually was wondering.
Yeah. Real quick, Nerdporial says season 3 was disappointing. The Kalon arc was underwhelming. However, he also says that Orville season 3 is better than Picard season 3. Did you see Picard season 3, by the way?
I did not.
Neither did I, but I certainly heard a lot about it.
Definitely, I've been avoiding information about it because I do plan to get Paramount one of these days and watch it.
Right.
And I'm just going to watch that. I hear there's other things that they might have for me to watch too.
Mm-hmm. Spock says, I love that you said in your description, Paul, the Orville is possibly the best Trek since Enterprise. Kind of funny that Seth was in the last season of Enterprise. Oh, I didn't know it was the last season. Wow. And we are sadly not talking about Star Wars tonight, Shanika. It is the Orville. But we will talk about Star Wars probably around the time that Ahsoka comes around, or if I think of something else to talk about with Star Wars. Or heck, what Star Wars topics would you guys like me to talk about between now and Ahsoka? Because I do take requests as far as what topics to cover. But anyways, Leia is a very interesting character because here she's just a simple school teacher.
And it's interesting that
and I know where she ends up.
Yeah, but what's interesting is that they bring their children into space just like the Union does. You would think a militaristic race would not really want to do that, but it kind of makes sense because, you know what? It's lonely out there among the stars.
It is. So,
oh, by the way, one of them, a child. There's also an indication of hope, being that one of the children of the Krill seems to take a fascination with Earth and its people, and actually want to, even going so far as to try to find it in outside the window of one of the spaceship.
Yeah. I'm real quick, by the way, I'm trying to find a. There it is. I saw this comment that you made, Nerdporial. I had to find this clip and play it. Let me bring it in real quick. I had to do that.
No audio?
Oh, no audio?
I couldn't hear
crap.
it.
I'll try it again. Where is it? All right, let me see. Yeah, I was sharing audio. I don't know. It's okay. We'll try again another time. But anyways, yeah, immunity syndrome. That's an underrated episode, in my opinion, of the original series.
It's
But
definitely a very good one.
it
Particularly
was.
had had some very good special effects of the Enterprise. And I'm talking the early special effects of the Enterprise entering the space amoeba.
And a great scene between McCoy and Spock where Spock says, "Then do what you humans like to do and wish me luck," or however it was that he says it.
Recall one of your Earth superstitions. Wish me luck.
Hmm. But anyways, back to this episode, the Krill. Not only do we learn just how religious the Krill are, but we also learn that the Krill are extremely weak to sunlight. And ultimately that's how um, Ed and Gordon thwart the Krill that we're going to bomb this one settlement. Is they turn on this intense UV lights all in the ship. See you later, Nerporio. And basically they literally cook all of the Krill except for Talea and the kids. Like they are left blackened.
Very horrific, definitely.
Yes. Like that's another thing too, that throughout this whole show, not in every single episode, but in select episodes, in select moments, there is some pretty gory deaths. Like in the very first episode, this one science lady is knocked into a beam that ages her 100 years, and she dies from that. And it's almost as gory as Walter Donovan aging forward in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
It's definitely disturbing. It definitely shows that this world has some stakes. I mean, this they will throw out the jokes, but there are times it's no joke.
Exactly.
This is a dangerous place.
Or
What's it?
for or
What
for
did Q
example, in
say?
episode 5, what did Q say?
Yeah, he said it's dangerous out here. It's not for the timid.
Mm-hmm. Or another example in episode 5 in Priya, that prank war between Gordon and Isaac escalates to the point that Isaac amputates Gordon's leg in his sleep.
I have to admit that I didn't know how to feel about that one. I mean, ultimately, I laugh at it, but it was like, whoa.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I couldn't believe that Isaac would go that far. Oh
Yeah,
boy.
but meanwhile he's like, "Ha ha! I got you. I have retaliated in the prank war." But Spock says here what Talea said at the end of this episode was disturbing. That the kids will remember this and learn to hate Ed Mercer and the Union. There are no happy endings, honestly, except for the final episode.
A hollow victory.
Exactly. And then the next episode that I want to go over, well, all the rest of the episodes are all just sort of character spotlights. Like, for example, we get a spotlight on Isaac in Into the Fold. We see Derulio, the Retepsian guy, come back in Cupid's Dagger, and
Wait,
we literally get a repeat of.
I I didn't know who that guy was. Delulio, the actor.
Who
It's
was
Rob
it?
Lowe.
Who's that
I mean,
again?
Rob Lowe. He was really big in the '80s. More from maybe it's because he's more of my time than he is now, but he was big. Um, he was also the first one to have rather private tapes stolen from him and sold on the black market. That's it. All started with him. Um,
I wonder if that's why he was given that part.
yeah, I mean, with him, it was actually very. It was a more honest thing. He. I mean, nowadays it's wink, wink. It was leaked. But
Right.
back then, this was. I mean, people were actually kind of shocked and felt sorry for him that somebody had done that. Um, but yeah, um, now that you've mentioned it, it probably was. Yeah, that's probably why he was picked. There was
Hmm.
another episode that really resonated with people, particularly when talking about this day and age. Majority Rule.
Oh, yes, that was a great episode.
Uh,
Imagine an alternate version of Earth, specifically 21st century Earth, where we are now, where absolutely everything, including people's opinion of other people, is determined by democratic vote, where everyone wears this badge on them with either a green upvote button or a red downvote button. And if someone catches you doing something in any way bad, they film it, take a picture of it, post it to their main social media, and all of a sudden you become the most hated person in the world, even to the point of getting arrested, tried literally by the court of public opinion, and 90% of the time found guilty and subjective to electroshock therapy on your brain that basically makes you little more than a vegetable.
lobotomy. Ew.
Hmm.
The
And all of that almost happens to John.
yeah, uh, Lamar. All because he swung around on a statue of a very important person who I assume was probably some sort of civil rights worker or somebody really important.
Yeah. And again, just how closely it mirrored our own time, because we here in 2023 may not walk around with either a green upvote button and a red vote button pinned to our clothing every day. But let's be honest, we kind of live in that sort of society today where if
Yeah, they weren't
someone
far off.
sees, yeah, if someone sees you doing something, I'm not even going to say bad, just odd, and they don't like it, they'll film you, post you to social media, and boom, everyone on the internet is judging you for it. And sadly, even if someone in our own legal system is found ultimately innocent, the court of public opinion will still carry against them. And I could come up with so many different examples of that.
Uh, Unfortunately, it's too easy.
It
I'll bet
is.
you. I'll bet you. I'll bet you. I could come up with 50. You could come up with 50, and neither one of us would mention the same one twice.
Most likely.
Uh,
So I think, and I think that was probably the another great example of just not only tackling a modern day topic well, but another example of the Orville tackling a topic far better than at least New Trek could today. Like, imagine a show like Discovery or Lower Decks or Strange New Worlds or something like that tackling this very subject. I don't think they'd handle it that well.
I think it's quite obvious that they don't want to handle it, but um, but hey, we got the Orville.
We do.
The just a
What's up,
minor
Jet
point.
Sparks?
Yeah. I don't know if you noticed the music, but it was very it was very creepy in this episode. What you are listening to is the return of the space. It was the musical instrument they used in Star Trek: The Motion Picture. The
I
uh,
don't remember.
you know how in Star Trek: The Motion Picture, whenever they would show V'ger, you would hear a twang.
Yes.
They brought that back for this episode, and when
Wow.
when the first gentleman meets his punishment at the hands of the court of public opinion, you definitely hear it as his mind is being electrocuted.
Mhm.
So that was interesting, and also interesting details because I actually looked at the guns that they were using, the policemen were using. They're not. If you look at them, they're not normal. They're trying to definitely keep Earth uh, in another universe. So this
Yeah.
isn't a just like Earth syndrome that Star Trek sometimes went into.
So it's a really great episode, and honestly, another great example, I guess you could say, of a Prime Directive episode, because Ed tries to get the Union Admiralty to send a rescue team, like an official Union rescue team for John, but they won't do it because they don't want to interfere with this planet's development and society. But if I'm not mistaken, though, the Prime there the Union does not have an official set in stone Prime Directive, though, do they?
No, uh,
I mean, yeah, that's
what
highly
the
discouraged, but
admirals?
it's not a do or die rule like it is in Star Trek.
Yeah, it's basically left to the admirals, and while they don't come out and say it, they're basically saying, we don't really want to tangle with a society and show too much of ourselves, which is more or less the Prime Directive. But they are willing to make exceptions, like contacting one person or a set of people whenever they need to get a mission done.
Hmm.
I mean, in this particular case, Lamar's being held in I wouldn't say maximum security, but he's being held by authorities, and to get him out would attract a lot of attention,
Exactly.
particularly in a place where that's so wired together, like this planet, Sargass 4.
So yeah, it's just a great episode that tackles a huge modern day issue that we suffer. And then the episodes after that, like I said, are all just different character spotlights. I already mentioned Into the Fold, that's a good spotlight for Isaac. I already mentioned in Cupid's Dagger, Derulio comes back and we find out the truth of of what really caused Kelly to cheat on Ed, and that being that Retepsians go in heat and release a pheromone that causes uncontrollable lust, not love, lust, in whoever receives it. Firestorm is a great look into Alara again and her conquering her fears in a really intense way.
We have we have an alligator in the. I just crushed an alligator in the shuttle bay. There's an
Yeah.
alligator in the shuttle. How can there be an alligator in the shuttle bay? I don't know, but it is crushed.
And then the episode New Dimensions, we see John, who was only a navigator at the time. He is found out to be actually a genius who plays dumb, and Kelly decides, to push for him to become the new chief engineer because Lieutenant Commander Newton is getting transferred to a different command. And ultimately, even though he didn't want to originally, John shows that he is worthy of the position and he becomes chief engineer.
Much to Yaphet's disapproval.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, wait a
that is
minute.
not that is not true, Yaphet. I have lots of gelatinous friends.
Oh boy.
And then the last episode of the season that we're going to talk about, Mad Idolatry. This is probably, at least of this season, the best example of why the Prime Directive would exist in Star Trek. Because, and this episode also draws heavily on who watches the Watchers. So, recap that episode for a second. The Enterprise comes upon this planet of proto-Vulcans that Federation anthropologists were studying from a distance because they didn't want to be seen because, they didn't want to contaminate their culture. Well, they get spotted by one of the locals who gets injured in trying to run away, and Kelly decides to go and sorry, not Kelly, Beverly decides to heal him, decides to beam him aboard the Enterprise, in which in his haze he sees Captain Picard. And basically he's returned back to his planet after a botched memory wipe, and he starts an entire religion around Picard. Well, in this episode, Mad Idolatry, the very same thing happens, except that religion flourishes far beyond what it did in Who Watches the Watchers, because the planet this time phases between universes, and every 11 days, 700 years passes.
Can you imagine?
Mm-hmm. So, when they first discover the planet is in the Bronze Age. And Kelly helps this one little girl and uses her medical skin regenerating tool to heal her wounds. And basically, from that one act, which she was not supposed to do, she becomes the center of this Catholic like religion centered around Kelly. And basically, she tries to go and fix it and talk to the Pope figure, showing that she is indeed not a god. But as with all corrupt religions, one of the Pope's bishops literally stabs him in the back and continues to spread the word of Kelly. We even get spoofs of, say, seeing Kelly televangelists, secularists, and atheists that don't believe in Kelly, holy wars, and Kelly from the Bridge of the Orville has to watch all of this. And again, it's clear that they're spoofing actual real life stuff, but again, it's handled in a way that is done really well, in my opinion.
Yeah, they don't go overboard with it, or they don't offer a judgment over it. They just point it out and say, this is what happened. Do you recognize this? And if you don't recognize it, let's get on with the story. So, yeah, I definitely see what they were going for. Although I have to admit, this was not my favorite episode. It's basically events were just a little beyond the crew. They just had to sit back and watch what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that they had to. This is one of those stories where you have to come to terms with the fact that you got to accept the world as it is, even if you make that one mistake that goes into another religion. There becomes a point where you just can't do much about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, the civilization evolves out of it and becomes spacefaring, and they kind of laugh about and say, "We're sorry that we thought you were God. That was embarrassing of us." And everyone kind of lives happily ever after, except this pretty much definitively puts the nail in, at least for now, puts the nail in the coffin of Ed and Kelly trying to rekindle their relationship, because they realize it's too risky for a captain to be in a romantic relationship with his first officer, which I believe they tried that with Janeway and Chakotay in Voyager, right?
They kind of did. They sort of switched it over to Chakotay and Seven.
And look how that ended up.
But yeah, it like I said, the episode for me didn't really hit home.
Mm-hmm.
But I understand what they were going for, and frankly, when it comes to religion in the Orville, the one that fascinates me more is the Krill.
Yes, I'm looking forward to see more of how that becomes what it is through season 2 and especially season 3.
You haven't seen season 2 yet?
No.
Okay. Just asking. But you will be getting more Krill, more they'll reveal more about their culture, and they'll reveal how nuanced things can be.
Yes.
Without it doesn't go down the that's the thing. Orville does not take any easy shortcuts to get its points across. I mean, it's everything has nuance. Everything's a trade-off. Everything you can have a happy ending if things go your way, but
that's all right, Jet Sparks. I didn't realize it was spoilers, so maybe I should have. So I think we both share blame in that one. But overall, season 1 of the Orville, I think you said it best. Where yeah, this show is still trying to find its footing, but it's still really good, and I'm looking forward to seeing season 2.
all right. Well, broad characterizations. What do you think of the humor? It's obvious they wanted to go for some humor in this. Did the humor work?
I am surprised at honestly how much I liked the humor, because I cannot stand the humor of Family Guy. Family Guy is frankly too raunchy for my tastes. And yet this works.
Yeah, it definitely works. It works for me, but there are times where they can get a little overboard. In particular, that episode, Cupid's Dagger.
Mm-hmm.
There were times where like, are they really going there?
Yeah, like with Ed basically turning gay for Derulio.
I was like, okay. I guess because it wasn't really set up that it was going to go in that direction. It was so sudden. It's like, wait, what's Mercer doing? He's doing that thing that women do where they shoot perfume up in the air and walk through it.
Yeah.
It's like, but if you're talking about the more fun stuff, like they were like having a party, and when you look at the party food that they actually have little hamburgers. So in the future, that's considered a spread. Where in Star Trek, the original series, they had some weird thing for celery. I mean,
Yeah.
like when they had Khan, when they were giving a special dinner for Khan to welcome him on the ship, not only did they have the blue drink, but they had the cubes and right in the middle a bowl of celery, which
I mean, it's healthy at least.
yeah, apparently celery is a delicacy in the 23rd century. So
Yeah.
it was
Imagine Khan is presented with that and he gives the same reaction Kirk did. What's this? Green leaves? It's dietary salad.
Khan didn't strike me as much of a veggie, but
Nah. But to wrap it up, this is a great show so far. I'm looking
right.
forward to getting into season 2, which we'll be talking about that again in 2 weeks. You're invited to be back, ActionCom. In fact, you're invited next week too when I discuss the final 6 episodes, I believe, of Deep Space Nine season 2.
Okay. I'll see what I got going.
All right.
The
So
I hope you're enjoying Deep Space Nine because it's definitely a interesting direction that they went with Star Trek after they've done the spaceship thing. Now they're doing space station and actual philosophizing
yeah,
on what does it mean to be in Starfleet and part of the Federation.
yes, it is definitely a very different beast entirely than what TOS and TNG were. But I haven't yet seen the introduction of the Jem'Hadar and the Dominion, but I can tell that it's building toward it.
It is slowly, but in fact, when that came out, I was not able. I was trekked out by that point, and I moved on the X Files, and I didn't realize it, but I was making a big mistake moving on at that point.
Yeah, X Files, by the way, is one of my dad's favorite shows. I remember he took an entire summer and binged that show, I believe, from Netflix.
But even
But
even X Files lost it for me. I actually didn't
yeah,
finish the final 2 seasons. But
well,
still,
guys,
this has been an interesting trip down memory lane for season 1 Orville.
mm-hmm. And I agree with Spock. I haven't even seen seasons 2 and 3 yet, but season 4, let's go.
What's going on in Hollywood right now will not bode well for it.
I know, but hopefully what's going on in Hollywood ends as quickly and painlessly as possible so that stuff like this has a chance of happening. So with that, we're going to go ahead and sign out. So thank you guys for watching. Make sure to hit like and subscribe if you haven't already, and we will talk to you guys later.